The guy who brought us Doom, a portal to hell, has had one hell of a career. In Doom Guy, legendary game developer John Romero takes us on a roller coaster journey through his life, career, and the video game business. We were honored to be joined by John on the show. Welcome to Business Books and Company. Every month we read great business books and explore how they can help us navigate our careers. Read along with us so you can become a stronger leader within your company or a more adept entrepreneur. But before we get to John and Doom Guy, let's introduce ourselves.
I'm David Short. I'm a product manager.
I'm Kevin Hudak, a chief research officer at a Washington, D.C.-based commercial real estate research and advisory firm.
And I'm David Kopek. I'm an associate professor of computer science at a teaching college. Designer, programmer, and entrepreneur John Romero is a living legend in the video game industry. He was the lead designer of some of the most influential games of all time, including Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Quake. He and the team at id Software in the 1990s is credited with defining the first-person shooter genre of video games and helping to solidify and refine new business models for digital video game distribution. The creator of more than 120 games, including critical successes spanning the mobile, social, and of course first-person shooter genres, John today runs Romero Games based in Galway, Ireland, with his wife Brenda Romero, a fellow veteran game designer. John's 2023 critically acclaimed memoir, Doom Guy, tells the story of his early life, career in video games, and design ethos. John, it's an absolute honor to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here.
So, John, we'd like to start at the beginning of the book, talking about your early life growing up in Arizona and California. Those are deeply emotional chapters. I found them very moving, very well written. To set the stage for the rest of our discussion, can you just tell the audience a bit about what your early life was like and why you chose to make that a focal point of the book?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in basically the desert in Tucson, Arizona back in the 70s, late 60s and mid 70s, I'd say, up to mid 70s. And, I grew up in a Mexican neighborhood with a Mexican family. I mean, I was born in Mexican and it was like, everyone was poor. Everybody, was a really great, loving family. But, lots of people got drunk and lots of antics ensued because of that, which is typical. It happens, it happens every day. But for a kid, for me, it was like just kind of staying quiet and staying out of the way was the best way to like avoid anything bad happening. And when my mom got remarried in 1976, she remarried someone who really didn't drink at all. It was like pretty much the opposite of my biological dad. And so he took us out of the desert and took us to Northern California. It was just an amazing town, Rockland, north of Sacramento. And it was a really great place to grow up. And that was where I finally, met computers for the first time in 1979. And, that's where I really took off. But before that was just lots of just, violence pretty much. And that like informed a lot of this, cartoons I would draw and then my, violent video games and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's, there's a lot of people that read the book and they can really relate to the same stories because, a lot of people kind of grew up similarly. So they're just kind of reading almost their life story. Sometimes some people said.
And I thought it was great too, in terms of your origin story. Some of the things that happened then kind of impacted what you would do in the future. So even things as transactional as, moving around all the time and not having as much stability always led you to ask for your partners to have some skin in the game and give some of the money up front so that you had that security and stability. And then I personally love the story of your mom, who was a really great character and I'm sure great inspiration for you. My grandmother was a bank teller, so it resonated with me when your mom went to school and got certified as a bank teller. But I love the anecdote where your family really never played any of your games, but one time you death matched your mom and you let her sort of kill you. And it was, I just thought that was such a nice capstone on the personal family origin side.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty great. Yeah. That was, what? She never plays computer games, but the one game that she started and finished in one go is What Remains of Edith Finch, which is pretty surprising. It's a 3D game, moving around 3D. But other than that, yeah, she didn't really, she's not a computer gamer.
So we'll jump forward a little bit, and I'll tell a little bit of the story. So you begin building games on your Apple II or your stepfather's Apple II. By 16, those games are starting to be published. By 18, you've gone to college, but it's kind of the wrong program, and you're sort of working some menial jobs while continuing to work on games on the side. Then at 19, your girlfriend becomes pregnant, and that's a seminal moment, obviously. The You get married, and you need to find an income because now you have a family to provide for. So you start interviewing very aggressively, and you spend a couple of days digging into the details of the Commodore 64 in order to interview at Origin Systems, and you take that big leap to move to New Hampshire, work at Origin Systems, and it's not really a situation that many 19-year-olds can relate to, although obviously some can. Can you tell us a little bit about that period in your life? It seems like a bit of a leap of faith. Was it a turning point, you think?
It's funny. I graduated in 1985, say June of 85. And 2 years later, I still didn't have a job in the industry, but it was like, oh, I'm going to kind of go to college and see how that is. And school never was a thing that I liked because I already knew what I liked. And if I could spend all day learning that, that was the best use of my time. That's what I believed. And at the time, nobody knew there was even a game industry. It didn't register obviously on any school's radars. Programming as a vocation was also just kind of a rare thing. So programming courses and everything was a rare situation, and those jobs were kind of rare. The game industry even more so because it was so small back then. But those 2 years, it's funny because I feel like, God, I just wasted 2 years, but it's like I just got out of high school and I was trying to see if college was going to help. But I felt, like in 1983, when I learned assembly language without a computer, which is ridiculous, I felt that I was just starting on the rocket, really learning a ton, making stuff nonstop. And 85 to 87 felt like kind of a slowdown, even though I was still making and publishing at that time. I felt like I should have been able to go, further than I did. But when I just thought, I just heard about the Apple Fest that was happening in September of 87 in San Francisco, which was basically the last one that they would ever hold. But it was an Apple II show. And I thought, this is my chance to go and show people there that I want to get in the industry and I know what I'm doing. And it was pretty amazing because I got 3 job offers while I was there, and 2 job offers and exposure to Origin while I was there. And that's the one I really wanted to go work there. And that was, I would call them all the time, but it was a big deal to just attempt to get a job. I knew that I knew what I needed to know to get the job. I just needed to contact people, and really networking is all it took. And networking was everything because I already knew what I was doing, and getting in contact with the right people and just keep on contacting them until they connected me to the right person. And then that's when I got my interview. And all I needed to do was start talking to people because I knew what I was doing. And it was really great being able to do a phone interview, then get flown there for a 9 programmer, interview, and then get hired. And I had just turned 20, just barely turned 20 when I got the job and moved up there. So, all the major life changes that people go through, which is get your first real career job, get married, move across the country without any parents around, and then have a kid, all within 4 months in 87 and early 88. That all happened really fast, but I was already on a rocket. So I was just speed running life pretty much.
Well, I'm not as avid a gamer as Kopech and Short here, but I am familiar with it's not karma farming, it's farming, or up front. You were front loading to get those experience points as quickly as possible.
Yeah, really. I had those 10,000 hours before I tried my first job.
Yeah.
And
And I love the vignette when you went into one of the conferences and just basically put your floppy disk with your coding on it into Origin's booth computer and just put it up on screen. And as someone who I run booth presences, or I'm at booths for some of my clients, And I was like, oh my God, imagine if this 19-year-old came up and like plugged into our big screen in front of the
Yeah,
conference.
imagine.
Yeah, it was quite an amazing story. So you were at Origin then and left in 1988. You had started id Software in 1991, but between that, you had some different entrepreneurial ventures, Inside Out Software, Porting House. You were at Softdisk as well. But in many of them, you were entrepreneurial as well. I remember friends would be in touch, colleagues would be in touch. You'd start working on different projects, but some of them would go south. And I was wondering, in that kind of interregnum almost between, Origin and id, what did you learn? And, there were some interpersonal conflicts there even, but what did you learn about managing people and conflict during those ventures that kind of helped you later in your career?
Let's see. My first company was the one I started when I just started making games, and that's the Capital Ideas Software Company, which I had for many years. And when I went to work at Origin, that became my full-time thing. I then, in '88, the manager, the guy that I worked with, who I really looked up to, John Fascini, he asked if I would be interested in co-founding a company with him. And we had a really great, relationship. We'd go to lunch every day. We talked about all kinds of stuff. It was really, really great. And so I really liked him. And Paul Neurath, who I was actually working on his project called Space Rogue, he asked me if I would be interested in co-founding a company. And I told him, oh man, it's too late, because I already told John last week that I would join his company he's starting up. So we co-found that one. Anyway, so there was a lot going on, and that New Hampshire studio was kind of winding down. Interestingly, just maybe a week or two ago, Paul Neurath sent me a big long email about more insight into what was going on in New Hampshire at Origin at that time, and how the early days of Looking Glass and how all that stuff went down. I was super focused when I was at Origin, and I was a one-person team, so I didn't have to work with other people. I just reported to John. I was doing stuff very quickly, like creating hardware to transfer data between computers when there wasn't anything around to do that. And so that got me a raise like pretty quickly after starting there. That was, for me, it was just natural. Just, I got to solve a problem. Here's how I'm doing it. And so John, that was one of the reasons, why John wanted to work with me. So when I left and started working with John, that had to have been like the biggest leap of faith probably in my whole career, where I loved working at Origin. That was my dream company to work at. And I was leaving like less than 9 months later, to found another company, with someone that I really liked working with. And I mean, I had a kid, a wife. I was living there, not with any, safety net with my parents or anything, just way out in New Hampshire. And, I was just like, this is the next step. I'm going to do it, and let's see how it goes. And it actually was working out pretty well until the industry started falling apart. Then I needed to get another job, which is when I, called up Softdisk and said, I want to talk to the president. And then, like that was another, like the same, I guess, confidence that I had when I was doing the interview for Origin, not on the phone and live in person, the second interview. That same confidence is what, I'm basically calling up Softdisk to try to talk to the president to get a job, because I knew Jay Wilbur was interviewing there, and immediately like, yes, I will fly you down immediately, And so that was amazing. And then got hired at Softdisk after just a weekend being there and just seeing people and hanging out. From then on, it was just like I was learning as fast as I could at Softdisk. I was learning and I was making stuff while I was learning. So I was learn a language on a new computer, start turning stuff out the first month. And that kind of, to me, that was like the stuff that I used to do at night, which is pouring all of my time and effort into my own games and stuff. I was doing that at Softdisk and loved it. It was amazing. I would even come home and then I would do even more work to make stuff I would sell back to Softdisk. So it was crazy. I would make, my day job is like on the PC, and at night I make an Apple II stuff, selling it to the Apple II department at Softdisk. It was just nonstop. I would just never stop making stuff. And then like I felt that I was stagnating after a year. And that's what I told the president, I need to make games. I can't just be here doing utilities and stuff like that. And so he convinced me to stay and that they would start a new product, which is what that Gamer's Edge thing was. And that was really like a pretty critical moment. I stuck with him. I stayed there, and then I was able to hire a team. For me, it was like starting a company within a company. So I was able to like build a new team, get an office, get computers. It's like making a company, you know, a startup within this big company. And I get to hire the right people. And I picked John Carmack because I saw I saw that just from the way that his code worked, that he was really good. And I wanted to hire him just from seeing his code. I knew nothing about him, but I could tell from his code. Then the story that I heard was he rented a PC because he found out that he could make more money selling PC versions of his games. So he rented a PC, learned how to program it, ported his game in a week, and returned the PC rental. And I'm like, I need to hire this guy. He is incredible. And when we got together for the interview, it was just like perfect, absolutely perfect. And then that's when he came in. And then things really went fast from that point on until we, made Commander Keen within 5 months of meeting each other and launching it and doing the company together and everything. It was like so fast, but it was super intense because it was all the hours except for maybe 8 hours a day.
That anecdote of John joining where they're like, oh, we've tried to recruit him. And you're like, no. He needs to talk to me. He needs to know it's someone else who actually understands this stuff. And we're only going to be making games. You guys are trying to sell about something completely different.
Yeah, you have no idea how to talk to someone who is as smart as him and knows that he wants to make games, and I can convince him that that's what we're doing and not some other garbage.
I think that's a through line of the book. The book, to me, beyond just an incredible personal story and game design story, is an incredible entrepreneurship story. And you're founding venture after venture, working nights and weekends. When you found id Software, you have still the job at Softdisk, and you're putting in these 16-hour days you describe in the book, 8 hours at Softdisk, 8 hours on id at night, and barely sleeping. And so I'm wondering where that drive comes from in you. Is it something from those early chapters? And I'm also wondering, you're an incredible people attractor. You're the one who really put together the early team for id. The finding Tom Hall, working with Tom Hall, getting John Carmack to come to Softdisk, finding the art intern, Adrian Carmack, and figuring out he's going to fit together well. I'm wondering, where does that entrepreneurial spirit come from for you? And where did you gain that ability to kind of be able to cite talent and see these folks would work well together?
Well, like think I'd mentioned before, in the book or whatever, is like having 10 years of game dev experience before that, having way more than 10,000 hours 10 years later, like insane 80,000, who knows? At that time, I knew everything about that Apple II and every way that anyone could program the Apple II, that when I saw something on the screen, I could tell it's almost like programmer art. It's like I could tell the programmer art style, which is basically the way that the person wrote the render code to put the images on the screen, which you have to do on an Apple II. You can't just use sprites like Ataris and Commodores. You have to actually put every dot on the screen in a style. And that's up to the programmer in how good they are and what they want it to look like. So it's almost like looking at a painting and saying, that's a Rembrandt. I know who that is. On the Apple II, I could tell you who wrote anything by just looking at the screen. And that's how deep I knew that computer. So when I see, Carmack's tennis game, I can tell you that was expert level programming. And that was rare to find, because I was very used to seeing everything ever made on the Apple II commercial retail software. I saw all of it, and seeing John's code for a little tennis game was just like, that's on par. That's really good. And I knew how much you needed to know to do that. So it was already a lot of implied information, a lot of experience that I just knew, looking at the screen, how much that person had to know to do that. So being excited about games and loving to talk about programming, loving to talk about game design, that kind of thing, is like other people who like that, they love talking about it too, and they want to talk to people who are just as excited. And so that, I think, is just a natural thing. Like if you're excited about something and you are talking to someone else who's on the same wavelength, then they're excited. And like, why wouldn't you want to make something together with people who have the same passion level, same dedication, same amount of knowledge, that you're not going to get frustrated that they're going to just do dumb crap, like they actually know what they're doing. It's like, those are the kind of people that you get very fired up working with. And it's easy to create a team when everybody feels like they're similarly passionate, talented, and driven. And when you can get that many people together, to make something, that's really rare, especially at that time where game software development was barely moving into the team realm. Like, everybody that was on that id team had been making games for 10 years, and no one had ever made anything with someone else. That's how solitary it was back then. So we were like a new team back in when teams were beginning to form.
And one of the reasons I would encourage everyone listening to read the book fully too, because ultimately this is a business books podcast, right? And Kopek was spot on in saying this is also a story of entrepreneurship. My takeaway was every team that you work on needs to have the Tom Hall, the John Carmack, the John Romero, the Adrian Carmack. And you guys, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but you just created great archetypes throughout the story to really give us a sense of those four key players, who they were and what made them tick and how they contributed to the business. And I really appreciated that. But going on into sort of the end of your time with Softdisk, there were some legal concerns that were brought up since you kind of started id while working at Softdisk. And ultimately, the founder of Softdisk, Big Al, who you also painted with a vivid paintbrush as well, you found a way to resolve that conflict amicably with him. And it almost seems from the book that if it weren't for Al's kind of practical, reasonable terms, we may not have had id Software. And I'm wondering, what can we learn from the way that the situation was resolved, the way that you negotiated with Al, that you would kind of give as advice to young entrepreneurs potentially managing conflicts like that?
Yeah, so there wouldn't be an id Software if there wasn't an Al, Vukovius. He was amazing person, gave me amazing chances. It would not have happened if it wasn't for him. He's such a great person. And because I really did like Al so much, I really respected the fact that this guy ran a company at that time for 10 years with 90 people in it. That's hard, and he did a lot of different things to make that money for those 90 people. He was doing direct mail. He was doing all kinds of extra things outside of his subscription products to make it work in a very depressed economy there in Shreveport. So I really respected him. And when we decided to leave to form id, and he basically said, please don't go, let's see if we can start something together, I didn't just say, screw you're going to try and take part of the money or any of that. It was like, okay, let's see if we can do this. And so he did talk about it to the other people at the leadership level at Softdisk, and they revolted. They were like, we will quit if you do this, because these guys are like pirates. They're out there, mutinying basically, and you're going to reward them with ownership to do this, and it's like, what about us? Like, we stuck with you this whole time. And so it was really and he was honest. We met after that, and he's like, I wish I could do it, but they would all quit if I did this with you guys, and I was just like, that sucks. I'm sorry. I mean, we had a really good rapport, Al and I. So leaving was, I did not want to screw him over because I wanted to start a product. That would be horrible for me to I want to start something. All right, we're going to grind up these brand new gears and start making a whole nother thing. That's hard to do. And we're going to put in all this effort with marketing and sales and everything. And then, never mind, I'm gone. Ha, I just made something. Horrible if I would have done that. So in order for him not to get screwed, I basically said, how about this? We will leave, but we will continue doing what we were doing in the office. We're going to do it from our own office. And we will continue to give you the same level of stuff on the same on deadline, just like before, not skip a beat, and maybe even go a little bit faster. And then you will have stuff in the can while you bring an internal team up to speed on our tech. If you want the latest stuff, use our technology. Let those people learn for a year. Let them put stuff in the can as well. And we will keep on making stuff for you. You don't lose. And if you just pay $5,000 a month, which is what you may have been paying, or maybe would have paid us, or less. Actually, he was paying he was paying half the amount probably because if we were making 20K each, that would be, 80K for 4 of us. That's 60K that he's paying for an 80K amount of work. So he actually got a really good deal out of that. Actually, sorry, it's even worse than that. It was 5,000 a game, which is 2 months, every 2 months. So it's 30K for a whole year for 80,000 worth of employment. So he had a really good deal. He was getting 3 times the value, not counting how.
And a fully booked employee is actually quite a bit more than just their their salary as well. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're getting full benefits and everything, but just the space and all of that.
Zero benefits. We had no connection to them anymore. It was just a contract to turn something in and get 5,000. We have to deal with it ourselves. So that was, it was a sacrifice for us so he would not get hurt. And a year was a long time for a new team. These programmers were good that were on our technology. They were not going to have a problem. In fact, they eventually quit Softisk and started using our Wolfenstein engine, and they made Blake Stone. So they ended up being an indie team as well in shareware.
Another theme of the book is being on the cutting edge of technology. And I think this is true throughout your career, that kind of new enabling technologies enable new kinds of game design. I even think later in the book, when you were early in mobile or early in social gaming. But going back to 1991, when you offhandedly said to John Carmack, what if we could have smooth scrolling on the IBM PC, which it's hard for my students to imagine, but you couldn't play a game like Mario on the IBM PC in 1991. How is it that nobody else came up with this until this team of 4, and you specifically having the foresight to realize this was so important and was actually doable, and John Carmack figuring out how to do it? But how is it throughout your career that you've always had these technical insights and how they could weave into game design that other people don't seem to either think are possible or, are not on yet?
I think that part of it has to do with coming from the 80s, and the reality of development back then was you did everything. You were the game designer, you were the artist, you were the audio person, you were the programmer and game designer. You had to do everything. And when you're in everything, you know how they all work together. You know how important game design is and how much work on the code side it takes to actually have a cool idea, but then make it happen. So it's like, it's a lot of work to do that. Like, ideas are easy. You just pop those out at any time. Making those a reality takes time, and it takes effort to take all of the ideas and create the perfect architecture on the code side. So you're not doing a whole bunch of code you're writing code to make all of these things work in a much tighter amount of work versus here are all my options. You just like make a million things one off. That's a really bad way to architect. It's all about taking everything that you want, boil it down to the perfect engine for functionality. And when you think in that way, that's just natural. It's not hard to imagine, like, say with the scrolling situation. And it was actually in 1990, in mid 1990 when we did this. The situation was like the fact that John got vertical scrolling working in Slordax, and he said that that's what he wanted to kind of try to do. When I saw that he was actually using the CRTC address registers for the EGA card to basically say, where in memory it should start displaying the screen, that one thing that I hadn't heard of anybody doing on the PC. So it was the first time that I've heard of anyone on the PC doing this hardware level trick. And it was like, that's incredible. No one's done it. He's doing it in a really smart way with this smart title refresh. And then for me, I'm like, none of those Xevious clones, Xevious is a 1985 game. None of these Xevious clones ever have changed the world. They're always just like, it's a vertical scrolling thing. They're fun, but it's more arcade world. It's more of the arcade world versus the console world, which was Mario dominated, right? Mario was the game back then. It changed everything. It rescued the whole industry in 1985. So for me, it's like, if we can get smooth scrolling like a Nintendo, then we have conquered this machine that basically is garbage and can't barely do anything graphically, because the way that the way that a lot of people would program it is through this thing called the BIOS, which was really primitive and actually pretty slow. And I gave John, I basically knew smooth scrolling horizontally enables us to make a virtual world that's really long, really big. It's like Mario, right? If we can do that, we can like change everything for this computer. This computer has now become a game system, and that just alters the whole market for everything. And to do that required horizontal panning. And so I just told him, like, if you can do this, if you can get a horizontally panning, now we got something. That like that's a really big deal. And for him, it was like, oh, well, it's just another register, and I just need to do kind of what I'm doing with Xevious, but I just need to do it, it was Floridex, but I just need to do it horizontally, and it's a little trickier to do it horizontally. But then he did it, it was just like I immediately knew, like I've never had anything in my whole life be that massive of like a nuclear blast going off, because I just knew that this was something no one had ever done before. It's ridiculous that no one had done it. Why had no one done? Why had nobody ever done this before? Because it is probably as technical as it gets for programming on the PC. Like, it's all in assembly language, which drastically reduces the amount of people programming on the PC. It's more of a business computer where you would use C compilers, and you would use Quick Basic and higher level languages. Lower level languages like assembly were mostly for the 16-bit computers, and so people doing assembly on the PC did not tend to get into the hardware of the PC. They would just use assembly to make the game parts go faster, and the graphical parts would not go so fast because they had limited knowledge of that. But I had gotten a book that was just released in 1990 by Michael Abrash that had all the information in it that you could ever know about the hardware on a video card, like you called video adapters back then. That's what I gave John, and it was just like, this is all you need to learn everything about graphics. And then if you can do horizontal scrolling, that's it. And then he did it, and that was like, we got to get out of here, dude. Like, this is unbelievable. The world has changed, and it doesn't even know it,
Yeah, and I think too, what I took away was that the design direction and the ambition and the desire to world build drove the technology in a way, and the engineering of the environment and the engine itself, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I lamented as I was you mentioned the dozens, if not hundred of pages Doom lore book, the Bible that you put together, and I feel like that was so different than other games that time. And it reminded me of the Warcraft 2 instruction manual, which was basically a novel. And I
Yeah.
read that thing back to back, and I would draw my own maps and everything because of what I read in that book. And I just lament and hate that. It seems like games don't do that anymore, right? They don't have the supporting material. And
Nope.
that was part of it. All the lore and the world building drove the engine, and then the engine was just technologically superior to be able to support that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was basically, how do we need to take this, like Mario at this point, Super Mario World was out, and it's like, it's very smooth. The SNES hardware was amazing. So we have to catch up, right? This first time the PC's been able to do this level of tech. We're still in almost like NES world because we haven't gone VGA. We're still in that 16 color world, but we are doing things on a PC that you could do on the Commodore and the Amiga and the Atari 800, and but on a business computer that everybody has, that is basically took over, and all those other computers absolutely died. Like that, those markets were erased, and so the only real thing was the PC, and it's like starting over with like a gimpy machine, but discovering the secret of how to turn it into a game system. And then it's like, how do we take that smooth scrolling and make it something that is, now we're not trying to copy the consoles, we're trying to take the design lessons of the console but make a game for the PC that is not a copy of Mario. It needs to be something like, we've internalized all lessons of Mario, and we need to take those lessons and make something that we all think would be fun, but not completely derivative, or you would just go, oh, it's just Mario. It's got its own storyline. It appeals to people like especially the Commander Keen storyline, where like the kid that you're controlling is a genius. He has a 314, IQ. He's going to save the Earth while his parents are sleeping. Like that kind of stuff. And it's a cool story. And so like we start off with an interesting story. We have world changing technology, and we give it away for free. We give the game away for free when we put it out. I mean, everything we were doing was new. And that was a shock to a lot of people. Like the fact that like a brand new game just came out that has technology the PC has been waiting for since it was created, and it's for free, and you can download it, and you copy and give it to your friends. And that right there, that's your word of mouth.
Well, and it, that ambition, that drive, that world building, and what you're talking about, the great technology, essentially the id team in the early 90s had that incredible chemistry, and it seemed like everything that you all were touching turned to gold. And I was just wondering, how is it for a team, all in their early 20s? You keep reminding us in the book. Remember, we were in our mid 20s here, and we would have done things differently if we had the wisdom of old age. But how did a team in the early 20s, how were you able to handle that kind of success, right? With venture capitalists and stories nowadays, we sometimes hear about investors bringing the adults into the room, to manage young entrepreneurs. But id Software was a bootstrapped venture setup from the start in a kind of a quasi partnership structure. There was still wires coming down from the exposed ceiling tiles. And, I'm just wondering, like, how did the young team, aside from buying the Ferraris, and I know you were kind of uncomfortable in yours at the start, but how did that young team handle this incredible success and keep things going without having that stricter management in place? And do you think more constraints would have killed the creativity?
Yeah, probably. Because if any biz guy had stepped in, they would basically take whatever they knew from their world that they came from and try to apply it to our world, which was a thing no one had seen before, and would have ruined it if we would have listened to them. But we were pretty adamant that we are going to continue owning what we are, who we are, and keep doing what we were doing, and keep trying to make the next best game. Like our focus was always on, this game is going to destroy our previous game, which was like the best game. This new game is the best game. That last game is dead, like dead to us. We're going to make this one and wipe out the previous game. We never thought, well, this one will sit alongside the previous game in a really nice way. It's like, nope, better, better, better. Right. And so start writing stuff from scratch, make new stuff. Nobody's seen this before. Last game is old garbage. This new game is the game. And that was always our attitude. And so we're always trying to do better and make better stuff. We didn't let it go to our heads because we were always working. Like, what are you going to do? Like, this is who we were. We made games all the time, and we were at work all the time. We play games at work. We love everything that we're doing. We didn't all of a sudden like make tons of money and go, you know what? I just don't feel like making cool stuff anymore. I don't want to make, amazing games. I'm just like, that's all I needed to do. It just kept driving us. It was like, okay, we're doing the right thing. That's why this money's coming in. Let's keep it going. All the money that comes in, put it in the company. If something happens, there's money in the company. If for some reason there's a downturn, or it takes us longer to get something done and the last game doesn't sell long enough, at least we've saved all this money, because what we really cared about was just continuing to make games. That was the reason why we were living, was to keep making games.
And you would keep cannibalizing your own product, but you still fostered the community and you elevated the community. And you say repeatedly in the book, always respect the fans, respect the players, the users.
Absolutely. They're the ones who are playing your game. And I mean, to like the crazy levels that we went to, which was, here's our game, change it as much as you want, have fun with that. And then later, here's all the source code to the game. Change that if you want. Do whatever you want. This game was made obviously for all of you, this community that has really grown up and stuck with us. It let us make more games. So we're going to let you play around with the thing that you love. I mean, we created Doom, so people could also mod Doom. They could change the game and do really fun stuff with it. And like, nobody was open like that. That just was not a thing back then. I mean, modding was a thing in the 70s because everyone knew BASIC, but the things you're modding were like adventure games and stuff. By the time Doom came around, it was a lot more complex making stuff, but it was still at that critical turning point where it was still simple enough to change the data to feel like you made an impact and did something cool, before the future of complex modding with Quake began. So it was at this amazing technology point that everybody just jumped in and made hundreds of thousands of levels and all kinds of stuff, and just really loved the game. You let people change your game. We're giving the game away for free. You can deathmatch with people. All this stuff, all of it was free. You can just do all of it for free. Like, it doesn't get any better than that.
You know, John, another theme of the book, I think, is really people management. There are later on in the book issues at Ion Storm, but I want to go back to these id days, and something that really felt like it crescendoed was when you were working on Doom, and there's some conflict about the direction of Doom between the rest of the team and Tom Hall. And Tom Hall is a close friend of yours. You would go on to work together for many years later on in your career. But it kind of comes to a crescendo, and this decision has to be made. And you're the one that has to kind of deliver the news and make the decision. I'm wondering if you can speak to what it's like kind of mixing personal friendship with professional work environment in the kind of intense environment like a game studio is. And what, you know, you're working those 16-hour days with your friends. And
Yeah.
that can lead to, of course, to conflict in any business. But this is a creative venture. This is a venture that has to be a little bit more freeform, as we discussed earlier. So what was that like, having to deal with that conflict during the development of Doom? And what's your advice to folks who are navigating these kind of situations?
Well, the thing that was really important was recognizing what was really happening, and that the reason why Tom was not like really delivering on the stuff that he was doing with Doom was because it just wasn't his kind of game, and that's not the kind of person that he is. You know, it's like we just went darker with Doom. You know, like Wolfenstein was like mowing down Nazis and blood everywhere and screaming, and then like Doom was even darker than that. And Tom is just a very positive, happy person. He's the Commander Keen type person. So it was like it was hurting him to keep working on the game, you know. And so it was like this actually was going to help him, you know, get away from that, and, you know, and not feel pressure making something that you really don't even believe in. It was just like a situation that just obviously it's like a frog in boiling water, like you don't recognize it. But it's like that's the kind of situation that things slowly turned in, was like, here's the kind of games that is true id. And Tom is not that kind of gamer or personality. And so it was just like, you know, it was just being honest about it, and Tom felt relieved, you know, like, yeah, you're right, it just, this isn't my thing. You know, we still hung around as friends, you know, and that's why we started two other companies together. I work with Tom every day in my office here in Ireland. He's working right next to me. You know, we're still working along, you know, for years now. He's been working on my new shooter.
There's a line in Mad Men: "You never know what builds loyalty." And it was when they didn't fire Pete Campbell. And I'm not saying that either of you all are Pete Campbell or Don Draper or anything, but you never know what builds loyalty. You never know what builds friendship. And it sounds like in that instance, you took on the difficult decision to, ask him to leave the team. But in doing so, it was for his benefit, and it's why he probably was ordained, and he was did the wedding of you and Brenda, right? That decision you made, ultimately probably made your friendship even more enriching, as opposed to him suffering and boiling like the frog. And so I appreciated that in the story.
Yeah, I didn't like he was a friend like everybody was, you know, at that company, Jay and everybody. And it's like I still hung around. I still hung out with them and went and ate out together and everything, because we were friends. You know, that was, was more important than everything else. And we both loved the same thing. And we both went through years together of working. I mean, I even before starting id, I had gone over to Tom's place to make stuff, make this little this little Alfredo game together at his place. And just we had the same humor. We just matched so well. And there's no way I'm going to throw that away. You like rarely find people in your whole life that you can connect with, on that kind of a level. And so it was important that, that I stay friends with Tom. It didn't even matter what we did together, just as long as we're hanging out making stuff, because he's just like unbelievable. He's just an incredible person. I feel the same way about Adrian and everybody. Like we went through a lot of stuff together, and it's not like being in the army or anything, but we spent a lot of hours, made a lot of really great stuff. We respect each other. We all did really great stuff in our own areas, and that was the most important part of our life, that early, doing that stuff. And it would be ridiculous to have it all just fall apart over the years, and all kinds of arguments and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I still talk to Carmack, sometimes meetings on Zoom. Adrian, hang out with Adrian as much as I can. He'd been in Ireland for a while, and we had done stuff for a while together too. So I've been in touch with all these people. I still email Lane. I still email Jay. Like, we've known each other for a long time. I've known Jay since 1986.
Listeners, if you're loving our discussion with John Romero about his book Doom Guy, why not continue the audio fun with the audiobook version of Doom Guy, narrated by John himself on audible.com. If you go to audibletrial.com/biz, that's audibletrial.com/biz, you will get a special 30-day free trial of audible.com as well as credits towards a free book. That's right, you can go obtain Doom Guy narrated by John Romero himself right now at a huge discount by visiting audibletrial.com/biz. I know you're going to love the book, and I can tell you, having listened to it myself, John does an amazing job narrating his story. Go check it out. There's a link in the show notes. A lot has been written about the incredible productivity on the id team. As you're building these games, you're building the King games in like a couple of months. And I've seen you talk in previous interviews about, well, you already had more than a decade of experience really building games. You're in your early 20s, but this is in your blood. I've also heard you talk about the chemistry on the team and that you use engines that have already been used on prior games. But even with all of that, the productivity just seems out of this world. And I'm wondering if some of that, and maybe, you're a little too humble to put it this way in the book, but like, are you all just 10x programmers? Is Adrian a 10x artist? Is Tom just a 10x designer? I mean, is there something just genetic here that it's hard to recreate?
Number one, it was a really special time back then because there was no social media. Like that social media will kill you. There were no notifications, there were no cell phones, there was no email, there was nothing that was going to interrupt your flow. And all four of us were in the same room, and we just had music playing, and we were focused on what we were doing. Like nowadays, I would not be able to focus if I had like lyrics in the room, like with music. But back then, I could sing Dawkins songs while coding in assembly really fast. So like, I don't know what that was, but like we could all do that. We'd listen to Metallica and hyper focus. Like I wonder like if we all had OCD and ADHD, because like I think multiple, we're on the spectrum somewhere, right? But that hyper focus is how we got to where we were at to meet each other. We recognize that we have this thing, and that hyper focus is how we got things done really fast. And we knew, like, to make something appear on the screen, all the types of code that we have to write to do stuff, we know exactly what has to be written. And it just, and the quantification of everything that has to get done is like the number one thing that we needed to do when we start on a new game. It's like, we need this many characters, this many frames of animation for these types of animations. We need this many characters. We need this many items. We need art for all of this stuff. We need background tiles for all of these types of terrain. These foreground tiles, title screen, credit screen, all these things, they all get broken down into lists, and we just crank on them. We just code them. We draw them. We design the stuff. We know how to limit our scope. We've been doing that forever. We think about making a game. We know how long it takes. Just like that idea right there, that's probably like 2 months, So we just know, because we know the work that goes into it, because doing everything yourself, you get really good at estimating after 10 years of making 100 things, 100 games or whatever. It was that's all of us together knowing how to estimate. Like, we all had experience doing that. And we would not have a problem rescoping on the fly in a second. Like, you saw that we had, times where we were like, that's it, we're getting out of here. 1 a.m. in the morning, we're moving. Like, we made decisions like that, and we did it. We spent all that time having a great time making stuff. It was like, you don't make games for 12 hours a day by being serious all day long. That's boring. So we have to have fun. We have to talk. We have to, like, comment on things, show each other the cool stuff that we're doing, get everyone excited about things, and almost like, treat these games like they're 2-month game jams, where everyone's just pouring every second into it to get it done as fast as possible. And we just kept doing that for years.
And don't forget Dungeons and Dragons for the creative direction, vision, and putting it off Steam.
Yeah. D&D is the foundation of pretty much all games. Like, that's conflict resolution, that is pacing, it's turn-based, you name it. Everything comes from D&D, and we love D&D, and we would play D&D. Like, the fact that we play games together, or like John and I would play F-Zero and Super Mario World, and Fatal Fury and Street Fighter 2, and you name it. Like, all those games, we played everything together. And so we would take breaks, go play games. Okay, come back in there, start coding. It was just, like, constant. Like, I'm going to go barbecue. Let's go let's go kneeboarding. Let's come back, code. Just keep on making the game. It's just like, we knew that after making games for that long, that we needed to have breaks at whatever times we felt like. We didn't structure anything. So it was just like, I just want to go do this. I'm going to run to the store. All right, I'll go pick me up or whatever. All right, go come back. Here's the stuff, man. Code, like, it was just like, we knew when to take a break from the screen, but we also took breaks with each other doing stuff. Yeah, it was really cool. Like, it's like UFC #1 came out, and we're like, we're all going to go to CarMax because he has a big screen TV. We're going to watch UFC #1. We're going to see Hoist Gracie. We're going to, like, we're going to watch this brand new thing and just hang out, and then we're going to go back to work. Let's go out to the pool in the middle of the day. All right, come back from a swim and code, make Wolfenstein. So it was just like, that's the way it was. We just hung out together. It was just a great time. And it was just like, we were making really fun stuff. We loved it. We were such gamers that we felt that if we liked it, then other people would like it. And we're always trying to put the newest stuff in there. It's like, oh, hey, sound cards now can make audio, like, did samples. So let's do that. Like, we'd have some screaming and chain gunning and shooting and everything. No one's ever heard this before. Let's do it. And, that's what we did when we were making Wolfenstein and trying to make music better. And, like, you name it, every little bit of our craft, we're trying to inch it forward to the next level when that piece of technology was released or something new and presented itself.
And then down the line, let's get 9 Inch Nails to do the the music for us as well.
Yeah.
So you described that really well, and I guess for me, it sounds like you guys kind of shifted away from, like, any kind of work-life balance to just, like, it was your life. The work was your life. It was the thing that you loved, and you were sort of living that way, and you were literally oftentimes leaving basically just to sleep. But I did want to go into that a little bit, because this has become a bit of a contentious topic in sort of the work world generally, and in gaming as well. So, you really were working incredible hours, obviously, with people that you were friends with. And, like you're saying, you're sort of taking the breaks as you needed them. But, many of these were sort of 16-hour days that you're describing. And I think that crunch probably was critical to a lot of the work that you did. So I guess, what do you think about those time periods? Is there anything that you would have done differently? And, like, what do you think of some of the I don't know, modern views that we need to give employees a work-life balance and stuff like that? Like, how do you think it's possible to do some of the incredible things that you had done? Yeah, like, how do you think that crunch period applies in our current time as well?
Yeah, so back in the day, if we had said, hey, you know what, 6 o'clock, let's make sure we go home and we come back tomorrow at 10 and continue. So we have this, so we have, like, lives that are like normal lives. We totally could have done that. We could have kept on making what we did. But I think that, for one, I was the only person with a girlfriend, and the other guys would have just kept making stuff. They would have not stopped. Carmack, absolutely no way in hell would he have stopped. There's no way. I mean, that's what we wanted to do. That's all we wanted to do. It's like someone who's a painter who's obsessed with painting and just has a vision, and they're going to make it happen, and they're going to do it until it's done. That's exactly what we were like. We didn't feel like it was a job ever. It was who we were. It was what we did. And the fact that we're with other people who can perform at that highest level, and we're all making really great stuff, it's just like, you just want to keep doing it. There was not a time where we were at night just like, God, I wish I wasn't here. That never happened. Right? That was like, if you think that, then you leave and go home. Like, that's real simple. We put in enough time. We don't need to justify going home because we have a headache or we're just tired of it. We did that because that's what we love doing, and that's what we were. Nowadays, work-life balance is super, super important. And my company right now, we have 100 people on it. And, people, this is a real professional job. Like, this is a real vocation, like any other professional vocation out there, being a lawyer, someone who's working a desk job. Like, this is that kind of a job. And people are doing really great creative work. But you cannot expect 100 people to be on the same, like that. They're not in their 20s, right? Like, everyone's not in their 20s where you have unlimited energy. So everybody needs to, like, you can't force people to do things they don't want to do. There's an expectation of, this is the time that you can spend at work. We'll pay you for that time, and then please go home. So you have a really great, family, or you're going to do the things that you really love doing. You're going to come back here. We are not going to pretend that this job is your whole world at all. And that's really important, because you cannot expect people to think that their job is going to be their whole world. We hire for people that are very qualified, and we don't know what they're doing at home. They could have a big family. They could be alone. They could love their cats, have fish, whatever it is. Spend all that time with what you love doing. Have some hobbies and love your work, and do a good job while you're here. But nobody is expected to work overtime. And we've been doing this for years here now. So we have absolutely shifted over to the work-life balance thing long ago. At least, Jesus, 20 plus years ago, we've shifted over to that. And it's not changed the fact that we can make cool stuff. It's just that's the timeline that we're on now versus back then.
Good mental wellness and good mental hygiene is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone is not the same. And so you have to establish a baseline that's healthy for everybody. And that's basically what we have. We're in Europe. We give people way more time off, like 5 weeks minimum a year. It's it's really, really, or if you look at our benefits on our site on romerogames.com, you'll see, like, we have benefits that nobody has. And it's because we're mature. We've been in this industry forever. We know what it's like to work and have families. People don't stay at jobs forever. Like, you can't burn people out and make them leave. You need to have people who are happy. And because have this attitude, we've had our employees with us for like 10 years now. And it's because they just like, this is just a really safe place to work. And they're not expecting me to kill myself. So this is great. I work with really, really smart people. I get time off whenever I need it, anytime, doesn't matter. Anything personal happens, please go. Do not think about work. Go take care of whatever it is. We care about the people more than anything. And you have to treat people like that, and you have to back it up. So that's how you keep people, around, is to give them a job that's better than everything else that they can see around them.
I love that you've given us a great segue as we get to the end of our time to talk about your role as a manager. And I feel like you were really wearing the business hat on that original team of 4. That was really clear. You were the one going out and licensing the engine. You were the one going out and overseeing the progress on things like merchandise or on deals for distribution. And I'm wondering how that period of working on a very small team and being the person with really the business hat on forge your identity as a manager, as you've done so many other entrepreneurial ventures since. And what was it that led you to want to take on that role? Why did John Romero take on that role instead of John Carmack or Tom Hall, becoming kind of the face of the company and the business person?
It was pretty simple. It was because I had the most experience with the people that I was with. If there was someone else that I was with in that group that had more business experience, please do that. Go do that, right? Like, say, Scott Miller. I'd say that when we connected with Scott Miller, he had way more business experience. It was evident, and it was important. He was at a different company, so obviously he couldn't run our company, but we took his advice 100%. When he said, you need to take a game and cut it into 3 pieces, we said, yes, sir, we'll do that. You know your market that you're selling to, we do not. And we're not going to pretend that we know that. And you don't, he's not going to tell us how to make a game. We're not going to tell him how to market and publish. And we respected each other in that way. And it worked out really, really well. And, but if I had run into anybody that knew business and software and all those things that I had done better than me, I would have loved it for them to just do that. That would have been really nice. But like, the longer you do it, the more you kind of become the person who really knows all this stuff. And it gets to be really hard trying to find someone that actually has that much experience, that can just do it for you. So, luckily, like right now in my Romero Games, my wife is the CEO. She's been in the industry since '81. So she's a great CEO. Our COO has run Demonware ran Demonware for 15 years for Activision for Call of Duty, like ran that whole company doing that. So we have people who have a lot of experience in managing hundreds of people, running teams, like all of that stuff. And so I can take the game director position and not worry so much about business stuff. I can just worry about the game and focus on that. And that's why, having 100 people means you have a lot of specialists in a lot of different areas.
So speaking about the business of the business and continuing on that, after id Software, you reconnect with Tom Hall and you get that publishing deal with Eidos Interactive to start Ion Storm. And as you go into detail in the book, ultimately Ion Storm, ended up being, something of a disaster, not through, any fault of one person or anything like that. But the biggest problem was not the games themselves, but sort of the people management that sort of forced you into some, bad business decisions. And it was a difficult environment in which, the games were developed. Your first CEO, Mike Wilson, he pushes you to do marketing stunts and media interviews that you're not really comfortable with. He relentlessly pursues forming a publishing company or publishing division, even before the initial games that you contracted for have good momentum. And ultimately, he tries to steal some of your team. He does the opposite of what you guys did in terms of honesty and transparency with Big Al earlier. The second CEO, Todd Porter, who was one of your founding partners, along with Jerry, the art director, and you and Tom Hall, he's being verbally abusive to members of the staff, making them uncomfortable, causing some of them to leave. It seemed like a hostile work environment. But because he and Jerry, Todd and Jerry, control 50% of the partnership, you were sort of unable to fire or control him. And ultimately, Eidos had to, kind of handle that just by necessity. I have to ask, given your business background while at id, didn't you have the experience to sort of be the CEO yourself, or was it something that you didn't want to, take on and you wanted to focus on the games? Would it have detracted you from being able to focus on building, Daikatana? But, I was reading this thinking, I almost wish that John had taken on the role of CEO from the start so that you didn't have to deal with some of these, outside pressures, or you could have made some more decisive decisions there. But tell us a little bit about that progression and tell us a little bit about Mike Wilson and Todd and should you have been CEO from the start instead?
Yeah, the thing is, I did not want to be the CEO because I wanted to focus on making my game, because that was the whole reason for this company was to make the next shooter that went a little bit further in design than what had been done in the industry. And if I was the CEO, you have no idea, that was a 120 people company, and we had 2 offices. We had so much going on. I mean, we had a COO, a chief marketing officer, a CFO, CEO, COO, CFO, CMO, all in charge of stuff that had to be done. And then we had 4 teams developing. It was just like, that was so much stuff to do when I need, like, the whole reason for everything was for me to make Daikatana and for Tom to make an Acronox.
Well, just spend 8 hours as the CEO and then 8 hours developing Daikatana. Come on.
Except that's not fun. I know, but that was just, it was all not good. Like, I definitely should not have started the company with anyone but Tom Hall. It would have been a much smaller company than the way it turned out, and we would have done things really differently. Really would have turned out differently. But
I'm trying to remember the name of the gentleman. I'm sorry to interrupt you, John. The name of the gentleman who headed up the team for Deus Ex in the Austin office, I believe.
Becker. Yeah,
Yeah, you gave him the experience, right? You gave him all the rope that he could have. You gave him a great environment, and they were able to sort of be insulated from all the trash that you were dealing with the
Yeah.
Mikes and the Todds of the world.
Yeah.
And so in my thinking, I was like, well, why didn't he just somehow create that insulated walled garden for himself? But it was almost impossible.
It was impossible. Yeah, we had a big open environment at that company. There weren't doors on things. It was just a big open, free flowing, office space, 2 stories high. It was completely open. It was not a place where, you didn't have a warren of offices.
Small anecdote. I've actually worked in that building. I worked for a consulting firm that has offices. It's a really nice building. The wood on the walls is all like, in the elevators is labeled from the different, foreign countries that it's come from and everything. It really speaks to like the peak of Texas, like oil money in the 80s or whatever. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, the oil club. There's an oil club, petroleum club is in that building. And we had the 2 top floors. It was crazy.
Just before we move on, too, I think I always kind of call back to our past episodes, and one concept that was brought up by Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz was the idea of management debt. And I think that we have examples of management debt here, and that's when you make a decision in the short term that doesn't necessarily ruffle feathers, but then just like a bank account, you're adding debt from not like making that decisive. And I see, like with Tom Hall, you made that decisive decision and you were able to not incur management debt. But, with the Todds and the Mikes of the world, and even with John Carmack's report card, right? That was when, to not ruffle feathers, you sort of, you built up some management debt as a result of that.
Yeah.
And, I think you came out great on the other side. But, obviously for our listeners, it's a lesson to kind of follow your gut. It's one of your Romero's kind of business rules at the end. Follow your gut and
take care of things before they fester, like immediately. Deal with situations head on, and try and resolve them in the best way possible, but don't just let them fester. Like, that kind of debt sucks, like in game development, there's a thing called tech debt, where if you don't fix a thing that is broken or is not working well, you're going to do it later, and it'll probably take more time to fix it because there's so much work done around that thing that to fix it, you have to now rewrite it to interface with everything else around it. So, the earlier you are, fix that thing as early as possible. That includes someone on the team has an issue with someone else, immediately deal with that. Don't hope that it blows over or hope that, someone will get over something. Like, immediately have people in a meeting and try to come to a resolution. It doesn't help, because that just could become poison, and poison will kill your company. So you need to immediately get people to resolve differences, give people different jobs if they need it, different roles, whatever it takes. And it's really important to just make sure your people are happy, just for your healthy progress on and any vector. Don't build up any kind of debt in any way, because you'll pay more for it later than there's interest.
Absolutely. Shifting forward a little bit, you were early in mobile games and had some critical success, although I don't think as much commercial success. And then you had a lot of success in the social gaming space with Ravenwood Fair, which you developed with your wife Brenda, I believe. Could you go into a little bit about, is there something universal about game design that allows you to work across these varied fields? What did you bring from, obviously your 80,000 hours of experience is always important, but what was it like sort of shifting into this very different vector for gaming?
With social games on Facebook, number one, not assuming that you know anything about that world, even though I've been making games at that time for 30 years, still not assuming that I knew what the people who were playing those games really got into. I needed to study it. Making it happen and coming up with a design is the easy part. The part that's hard is trying to figure out what your demographic is and what they like and how you can do something better than what they are currently enjoying. And that was the 3 days of research that I needed to do to kind of find yeah, these games make money. Where are the monetization pressure points that people accept in this world of Facebook games? What are the patterns of play? What are the patterns of user interface on the screen? Because it was really important that in my game, I adhered to the norms of the interfaces of the current big games. Because if my interface was really different, the women who were playing my game at lunch, they wouldn't play it if they had to learn a whole new interface. It needed to look like their other games, functionally, and the buttons in the right place to do some of the similar things. So it's really important to keep your game as easy to play as possible, to keep your design the same as much as possible, but go a little bit further, like show people that this is more interesting and has a new thing that makes the whole world more interesting than the other game that they're playing. And so that was all that needed to be done. It wasn't hard to come up with a design. It just happened immediately. It also happened that I found a Facebook game engine that was the fastest thing that no one had seen yet. So it was almost like, oh my God, I got a secret weapon here. And so I have a great game engine that can draw graphics at 60 frames a second on screen. So my design needs to fill the screen to blow away everyone else and all the other game companies making Facebook games to go, how are they even doing that? That's not even possible on Facebook. And so I needed to design something that took that into account, but and wove that into the design and the patterns that this demographic, which is 43-year-old women playing games on their lunchtime, I needed to make that kind of a game that would appeal to that person, that was very responsive, very fast, generous, more generous in the time allowed for play, free before they monetize. So they would spend more time on my game because I allowed them to play it long. So yeah, it was real important to do all those things right. And so I designed that game instantly, pretty much, and then we just executed that design over 2 months and 19 days and released it on October 19th. And the rest was history. It exploded. The game made, $1 million its first month, and had 25 million players 6 months later, 25 million every month, which was huge. The company went from 30 people to 130 people. So that was, really big success with that game. But that was it was a bubble. The bubble blew up.
Well, as we conclude, John, I did want to ask you a structural question about the book. And I don't want you to take this as too much of a negative, because this was my favorite entrepreneurial book I think I've read in the dozens I've read for this podcast. I absolutely love the book. But there was one structural thing that I found interesting, which was early in the book, the first few chapters, obviously, because you're a young person, really focus on your personal life. And I got really invested in you and in your personal life. And then around the time that you're starting id Software, it really focused to professional life, but almost exclusively. We do get some updates. We get, a paragraph, a page here and there. And, but I got so invested in you in those first few chapters. What was, as an author, why did you decide to make such a radical shift around when you're in your early 20s, when you were writing the book?
Well, even in the, I'd say my teenage years, I was getting more and more basically deeper into programming and spending more time on it. And basically wanted to reflect that the amount of time I was spending making stuff at id, building all of my stuff, that the amount of words in the book dedicated to that versus any personal stuff was actually appropriate, because I did spend all my time doing that. Like, when you look at the amount of hours every day that I was spending and the amount of hours that I would be like, go home and sleep and say hi to, to the person I was with, very little time, like that was what I did. It was kind of like, if you ever read Isaac Asimov's his autobiography, he had his hands on a typewriter most of the every minute of the day, and that was a manual typewriter, and he wrote 800 books, like incredible output. And for game development, that's basically what I had. I was spending all of my time doing this stuff. And so that was like, I did not spend much time not making games back then. So I didn't really write much about the people I was with, because I didn't see them that much.
So I have a counterpoint to Kopech, though. And, he did also say that this was his favorite entrepreneurial book that we read when you weren't on the podcast. So we know it to be true. But, I think your book starts with family. And for me, it almost like ended with family, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was a very traumatic time in your life when your house flooded. But that's when it kind of came back to that cinematic, we're in the desert. But in this case, it was your mid-20s son, Michael, leading you through the house with FaceTime to discover that the archive was still there. And I enjoy that then it came back to family. And that's when you almost kind of opened your life back up more. And the one thing I noticed too was, you were almost now living the first person through him as he was guiding you through. And he pushed that door in your closet and was almost like a door in doom that he was opening. And I just thought it was cinematic and incredible. And after that point, you almost gave up the first person POV and the first person shooters, and you went into some of these more the social and the smartphone. And so I don't know if that was intentional. I'm an aspiring novelist stuck in the body of a research consultant, and so I always love those features in books. But I thought you did a great job, and that was my counterpoint to Kopech.
Oh, thanks. Yep. Yeah. And I work with Michael. He's been working on this game for a while. He's in California. I'm in Ireland, but he works on it every day. One of our oldest daughters, she's in the office every day. She works, at our company as well. And the youngest daughter, she's a programmer at the company as well. So like, we have 3 of the kids are working at the company on this game, or doing stuff with the game at the company. So it's a family business. There's 5 of us total working at the company.
And I love that, because sometimes parents will say, don't do what I did, go into something different. But you have a lot of trust and you have a lot of faith in that industry and that system where you brought your kids into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And the things that they're learning could be applied anywhere else. So it's not like they got into a dead end, too specialized field. It's super applicable, the skills that they're learning. So, like if the kids who are programming need to just like, well, the game industry imploded or something, there's plenty of other things that they could do. And they are, they have more expertise than it takes to like do JavaScript and build websites. Like that's pretty way beneath them. And it's easy to get a job, doing that at their level, but they wouldn't do that anyway.
And like you said, go recode Obamacare 2.0, a person that worked with you, right? So there's always application.
Yeah, that was Joey.
It really feels like your fans have been really excited, John, the last few years that you've been kind of returning to your roots, getting back into the first-person shooter genre, expanding on Doom. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit about what you're up to right now at Romero Games and what's looking forward for Romero Games.
Sure. Sigil 1 and 2 are now part of Doom 1 and 2's remaster that's just been launching right now. So Sigil 1 and 2 are in the main menu. They're in the packaging, on the cover, you name it. That's amazing to have that recognition and to have that in front of millions of people. I'm working on Hellion, which is for Doom 2. It's a big, huge collection of levels. That's just something I do in my spare time. I'm also, during the day working on my big shooter, Unreal 5 based FPS, big publisher behind us. Been working on it for years. Have not mentioned, it's not announced yet, but it will be announced at some point, and then we'll be able to talk about it. But other than that, there's just lots of conferences, go to conferences, work on projects, work at the company on games or on the game, and just manage all of it, because it's really a lot of work to just to oversee every little detail of a design of a giant game is a lot of work. But that's what I'm doing every day, and it's a blast. I just love it. So yeah, really, really in a good spot right now.
Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know I speak for all three of us. We absolutely love Doom Guy. It's one of our favorite books that we've read on the show. And is there anything that you want to plug to our listeners that they should go check out right now? Of course, we'll put all of your socials in the show notes and links to Romero Games, but is there anything else that they should have an action item on right now?
Absolutely. If you love Doom, Quake, Wolfenstein, any of the stuff, Sigil, all that stuff, go to Romero.com and we sell tons of merch. I sign all of it. I can personalize it. That's if you want any kind of Heretic and Hexen and all those games, all that stuff is sold on our site. So if anybody wants any of that stuff, just go to Romero.com and check it out.
Well, thank you so much for everything, John. I know my students are going to be shocked that I interviewed the John Romero, and we hope that you've enjoyed the conversation too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, it was really amazing having John on the show. We're going to be reading another book that's in a very different genre for next month. David, can you tell us a little bit about our book for May?
Yeah, so we're picking a timely book this time around. We will be reading Free Trade Under Fire by Dartmouth professor Doug Irwin. It unpacks various viewpoints on free trade and tariffs, and in the 5th edition, which we'll be reading, covers the first Trump administration, but generally debunks many of the myths around free trade and globalization, and really will help our readers to understand the importance of free trade, the impact of tariffs, and real data on the impact of tariffs on our economy. The three of us all graduated from Dartmouth, so we're really excited to get a chance to learn from Professor Irwin. Hope you'll all enjoy reading along with us.
And you're making the assumption that free trade is necessarily a good thing. I guess we'll decide for ourselves after reading the book and talking to Professor Irwin. Okay, anything that the two of you want to plug? How can listeners get in touch with you?
You can follow me on X at David G. Short.
And you can follow me on X at Hudak's Basement, HUDAKS Basement.
I'm on X at Dave Kopec, DAVEKOPEC. Don't forget to subscribe to Business Books and Company on your podcast player of choice. Hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button. We do monthly episodes, so there is a little bit of a gap between each of our episodes, but they're worth the wait. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to leave us a review. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again next month.